Change of plans. Let's do part 2 of our mailbag from Twitter questions today, talking more about on-court stuff. What player could take the biggest leap? Who should start at the 3? Can two youngsters that I've never thought about fit really well together? We'll break it all down today and more on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and the Westside Community News. And today, change of plans from the original schedule for the week. We are doing the second part of this week's mailbag episode, talking all things offseason, looking ahead at the coming season. Yesterday's mailbag was all about free agency, trades, additions, things like that. If you're interested in that kind of stuff, go back one show, or Russell Westbrook stuff, go back 2 shows. Today's all about looking ahead. We're talking about players who could grow this season, pairings that might make some sense, Rick Carlisle's role coaching this team, and a bunch of sillier questions today, which people like. You were promised James Boyd today from the Indy Star. We had a scheduling fail. It's my bad there. So we will actually do that on Friday instead of today. And tomorrow we will build a Pacers rotation, an activity that I've had some trouble with. But today is all about questions. I've split these into groups, but I didn't have any sort of luck naming these groups. So we'll just dive right in. And the first group, I guess, is all about young guys and leapers and improvement. So first up, question comes from Ryan at the Hasselt Hoff, who says, who makes the biggest leap this coming season? I thought that was a good question. First of all, I interpreted it very literally and said Isaiah Jackson will take the biggest leap this season. He will physically jump the highest because he's the most athletic player on the team. That is not what the question being asked is, although I would not behoove someone who thought Isaiah Jackson was the real answer. My answer is going to be Tyrese Haliburton. I think Tyrese Haliburton, of all the Pacers players, takes the biggest leap from last season to this coming season. There's a reason a lot of sports books have him as a most improved player favorite, or at least close to the top of the list. I don't know about that. I haven't looked at a list of who all the candidates would be, but I do know that when you look at guys who have had similar numbers to him, and I'll bring up one specific one, Mark Price, a Cavs point guard, 4-time All-Star, multiple-time All-NBA player who had similar numbers early in their career. It just sort of took a slight role change and a slight mindset change for Price to take off, right? He was a really good distributor and scorer his second season, 16-6, and shot really well from 3. His third season, he was an all-star, a 19-8 guy. Then he became a 20-9 guy, and he still shot very well from 3 for his whole career. But it just took a little bit of role change for him to have that take off. And I think Haliburton now, without Brogdon on the team, in a new franchise with a coach that loves to teach and help those point guards out, I think he is set up well. I don't know about all-star level like Mark Price, who had similar skill set in terms of stats, but I think he is in a great spot to take a big leap, mostly in terms of his aggression, right? I think that is still, to me, one of the biggest knocks on his game is, as talented as he is, as good as he is at reading the defense, scoring, getting to his spots, where he will massively jump in value, especially now that he's in a better situation and role on the same franchise, is as he looks to score more, as he looks to get to his shots. He's such a good off-the-dribble shooter. He's such a threat getting into the paint and moving the defense. If he himself just adds a floater or is more confident with a 20-foot jumper, even though you don't want him taking a ton of those, that changes the way he's defended, that adds to his bag. I think those sort of tiny little improvements that are hard to add but would add a lot of value for him are going to be there, and he's going to jump up quite a bit and be the most improved Pacer this season, which is funny because the second question in this segment is similar but different enough that I can still do this. Callum, at Jenkins22 Callum says, if you had to have the basketball part of the question says, whom do you think is going to make the biggest leap defensively this season? That is a good question, I thought as well, because I would not say Tyrese Haliburton for that part. In fact, as high as I am on Tyrese Haliburton, the player, I think his defense is pretty bad. I think that is a way he can take a big leap next year, is even just becoming an average level defender. He is not at that level of his career. To me, there are 3 candidates who this could be, who could take the biggest leap defensively for the Pacers, going from an average guy to a quality guy, or a guy who can change roles and do sort of different stuff. The first name I typed immediately after reading the question was Goga Bitadze, because I still think, as the enforcer type, Goga reads the game pretty well. he is usually able to tell what he's supposed to do or where he's supposed to be. He's had two problems in his career. One is he processes it just a hair too slow, and then he's a half step out of the play. Or he is already a half step away, but he reads it correctly, but he's too far from where he needs to be, and so he can't catch up. If he gets a little bit better at defensive positioning this offseason, playing with the Georgia national team, that sort of stuff, I think he could be a really improved defender, just be in the right spots more. Yes, he has speed and athleticism limitations, but that has not stopped players of his skill set, like Brook Lopez, for example, from being uber talented defenders. I just think for him, it's going to be timing and getting in the right spots quicker and more often. I think he can do it. He does read the game very well, despite having an up and down career. Aaron Nesmith's a guy I considered here. Athletic defender his whole career anyway, has just never really fully put it together on either end of the floor. If he can a little bit there, or just given a longer leash to kind of figure out his mistakes and grow the new team, I think he could be. And he, at least per BPM, was a positive impact defender last season for Boston, despite really struggling on the offensive side of the ball. I think that's something he could carry into next season. And again, with a longer leash, with more role, with different guys next to him, he could be a guy that grows into at least a above average defender at his position. Not a high quality wing defender. At 6'5", you're kind of limited in what you can do there, but good enough that he can keep his minutes. And if he does get a rotation spot, earn it every night. And the third name I typed was not Nesmith, but Jalen Smith. Jalen Smith has an opportunity to be take a leap defensively if he plays the four a lot. And this is funny because I have a feeling this could happen. And I'm not saying that Jalen Smith will take a leap defensively, but what I have a feeling about is he could get stuck in Sabonis cycle on defense. And that is where the coverage, and I am complicit in this, is a lot of, if Sabonis would just get a little better defending away from the basket, if Sabonis would just get a little better defending away from the basket for 4 years, and talking about Smith and some other center pairing defensively, and if he never gets great at it, then it won't matter. But he does have the mobility, I think, to be okay defending away from the rim. And he played a lot of minutes at the 5 for Phoenix, but he did defend at the 4 more for the Pacers, next to Goga sometimes, next to Isaiah Jackson, whoever you want to talk about as the 4-5 in that combination. Either way, he did show some mobility and speed, and I think that he can do that kind of stuff. And if he does get a little better at it, or he comes in and is just ready to go, he could be a guy that takes a big leap defensively and shows what he can do at that 4 spot and takes off a little for the Pacers on the defensive end. If you need to pick between those three, I would say Goga is the most likely, but I think Smith and Nesmith have similar chances to becoming becoming an above average defender at their positions this coming season. Good questions about leaps. I think it's going to be interesting on a young team. I mean, it could be so many guys that it's just really hard to get a proper answer. James Murphy at James2_Murphy says, what are your predictions for Mathurin's rookie season? Before I say this comparison, I would like everyone to note that I am not comparing these players at all. I do not think their skill sets in general are similar, but I do think one weakness they have is going to kind of help connect what I think could be similar younger seasons. Paul George's first couple years with the Pacers are sort of, to a smaller scale, how I envision Mathurin early in his career. Not that I think, Paul George's rookie season, he only played 20 minutes a game, wasn't starting. That's not the case. I think Mathurin will be a day one starter for the Pacers this season and will play somewhere between 28 and 30 minutes a game this season. That's a lot for a rookie. That's trial by fire. But when you're a top 6 pick, that's what happens. But I think that, when I was kind of typing down thoughts to this question, I typed, I think he's going to struggle to drive by guys, and I think he'll defend fine for a rookie and shoot averagely. And PG was a little bit worse than that as a shooter, certainly. But what helped PG grow early in his career is he got the handle down and the shot at the same time. And I think Mathurin will struggle with the handle at first. That will be something he has to grow into and work on early in his career that will kind of put it all together for him on offense, certainly. He could be an off-ball shooter, but then he won't be able to have the ball as much. But he'll be able to have it more when he can handle, which will allow him to take a different kind of threes. And, those of you who remember Paul George's growth will see it similarly. So I don't think that his stats will mirror Paul George's at all. Not at all. I think they'll play two different of roles for that to happen. But in terms of how he actually looks on the court, what that looks like, things like that, I think that you'll see those sort of skills shine and not shine for Mathurin, similar to what you saw for Paul George early in his career. Again, not comparing the players, just similar games, similar things like that early in his career. And I think the struggling to get by guys will actually look a little painful at times for Mathurin, but as long as the shot's good enough, like Duarte level percentages from last year, for example, he will look fine. His defense will be fine. His athleticism is good enough that he'll have enough big games and moments that, yes, there will look like some impediments in his growth, but he will still have a fine rookie campaign that will be put more together with a full NBA offseason with no pre-draft cycle. The normal things that happen to rookies in his shoes. Good question, though. But it's hard to really predict what he can be without seeing him, in preseason action and training camp, things like that. So, good questions for everybody. We'll keep rolling into segment 2 here. Hey guys, going to take one short little break here to talk to you about betonline.net, the number one source for all of your sports wagering information and the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your betting needs. You can find all your favorite sports and events at the number one online source for odds, lines, and games, reviews of and news for every major sports league on there: baseball, NFL, MLB, NHL, combat sports, esports on there, even golf. And they continue at betonline.net to be the top online resource for all your sports wagering info, from live in-game betting, scores, and podcasts. They've got you covered. They have updated title odds after the Celtics' rumored pursuit of Kevin Durant. The Celtics now first. Very interesting. The Pacers not last, fifth to last, ahead of OKC, Orlando, San Antonio, and Houston. Those lines all over at betonline.net. Head over to that website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action happening today at betonline.net. BetOnline is where the game starts. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Pacers your first listen today and every single day. Hey, for a second listen, Locked On Celtics. Hear the latest from John Corrales about Jaylen Brown, Kevin Durant, whatever the heck is going on with all that stuff. That's a crazy news cycle from the NBA. Let's continue to dive into some of your questions from Twitter. I really enjoy these shows and hearing what you guys want to hear more about. NY Pacers with an interesting question, continuing on the Mathurin theme, says Mathurin and Duarte or Mathurin and Buddy in the starting five, assume no trades. Yes, good caveat. I appreciate that here. This is a really interesting question because if you'll recall, a couple weeks ago, I had Scott Agnes on. We were just chit-chatting about the Pacers offseason, what they could still do, things like that. And he mentioned Buddy as a starter for the Pacers. And I kind of stopped listening to what he was saying and started thinking about that, what that would mean, what that would look like, why the Pacers would consider that. And then I caught back up to what he was saying. If you listen to the show, it's still good. But I hadn't thought about it until he said that. Because in my head, I defaulted this entire time that it would be Duarte Mathurin. And the reason I thought I thought the starters would be Haliburton, Mathurin, Duarte. I don't care what position you say they all are. Just those three guys as your backcourt. Because that's going to be their backcourt, presumably, barring no trades again, for years, for 3-4 seasons. And maybe they draft someone else at those spots or something. But those three guys seem like they'll click together. A lot of people say they view Duarte more as a sixth man type, but that seems like a projection of a little bit more handling and self-creation for Duarte than I project from him, whereas I think he's going to be an elite shooter. Either way, I think as soon as possible, which is game one of this season, the Pacers should be getting those three players, Duarte, Mathurin, Haliburton, as many reps together as possible. And if that means starting those three guys, so be it to do it. Because here's what I will say. Buddy Hield is an awesome shooter. Even if the percentages aren't there, the gravity he has, the threat he puts on defenses really, really helps the Pacers. Like, just going back to last season, Buddy Hield played with the Pacers. He played 925 minutes with the Pacers. His on-offs were crazy. The Pacers were worse on defense with him out there. His defense is bad. The Pacers were 11 points per 100 possessions better with Buddy Hield in the game. Insane, the amount of positive impact he had on the offense. The Pacers shot 2% better on two-pointers with Buddy Hield in the game, and 5.5% better on three-pointers with Buddy Hield in the game last season. So he provides a ton of spacing, makes life easier on everyone. What does that mean? That is where his merit of starting is. He is one of the few young guys, Miles Turner notwithstanding, that I would understand if the Pacers wanted to give him heavy minutes for that reason. If you're trying to make Tyrese Haliburton be more aggressive, having a guy like Buddy Hield out there that gives him more space to operate and more space to make mistakes, honestly, is really helpful. Same thing applies to Ben Mathurin. And so maybe you do want to take Duarte off the bench, or maybe if Mathurin's really struggling early, you can have him come off the bench and go against some easier opponents to kind of grow into his game. That would make some sense to me. I would understand starting Buddy Hield. He's one of the swing guys to me. I still think he'll get, looking at the Pacers roster now, a healthy amount of minutes. But I think the starters should be the young guys because Buddy Hield has 2 more years left on his deal. He's already in trade rumors with this team. Like, I don't think he was a key piece that Pacers really wanted in that Kings trade. Not that he wasn't helpful for them last year, but that was about getting Tyrese Haliburton. And if they can get stuff for Buddy Hield, I think they would consider it, especially with Andrew Nembhard in the fold and Aaron Nesmith in the fold. I think they would consider it. And so we'll see. I think that there, again, is merit to the answer being Buddy Hield. And if someone said that, I would get it. But I think the young guys are the answer. And I think this season is going to be a lot about youth and development for this Pacers team. AJ Reese at the AJ Reese, you changed your ad on me. You used to have 13s in there. Says he had a 3-parter, his thing. He loves the multiple part mailbag questions. The Pacers ones come at the end. First one is least favorite fan replies, gifts, or trade hypotheticals. Some background for those of you who are either not on Twitter or don't know the jokes here. I don't think gifts are funny. Not because I don't like gifts at all. Not because they're like bad or problematic or anything, but just because 95% of gifts are the same gifts. It's Michael Scott screaming "No, please no" in the office, or Dwight doing some silly thing, or Jim making some face. A lot of TV show references that just I don't know, they kind of lose human interaction to me. There's no like emotion or conversation to it. It's just sort of lazy. So I don't like gifts that much unless they're either really original or like on the nose, perfectly topically funny. But I really, really hate fake trades. It's just people making stuff up, and it's never a good trade. It's very rarely a good trade. So I hate trade hypotheticals way more than gifts in that question. Fake trades are such a waste of time to me. I don't get it. I don't get it. Aren't the games more fun? Don't you want to think about how the team that you like can be better as they play the games? Not, oh, what if they had this guy instead? I don't know. That's just not how I think about the game. So gifts. I do not like gifts. Question 2, and this one will come up later similarly. In fact, I might have skipped over it by accident already. I did sort of skip over it. I will work it in here. Callum had a different part of his question. AJ's second question was favorite food at the Fieldhouse / nearby. Good question. In the arena, I am not a good person to ask because we get food in the media room, and it's usually buffet style. So, yeah, we pay for our dinner down there, and so I don't eat the Fieldhouse food. But there's a Chick-fil-A in there, so that would be my answer because I absolutely love Chick-fil-A. There's one opening very close to my apartment in the next 8 days. I know exactly, which is embarrassing, that I'm really psyched about. But nearby is an interesting question because I do live downtown in the city. So if you are looking for recommendations, let me know. Pearl Street Pizzeria, my favorite. It is fantastic, super close to Gamebridge. I almost just said Banker's Life. Gotta try it if you're nearby. That's one of my favorites. Obviously, that Chick-fil-A when it comes. Shake Shack's on my walk home. Not everybody's cup of tea, obviously, but it's in the perfect spot for me. And right around that's a bunch of good bars in terms of bar food. I love the Eagle, which is not very far away as well. So those would be my recommendations. But if you're looking for nicer food, like not a post-sporting event food, that is not the time on this podcast. The third question AJ said is if you couldn't cover the Pacers, what teams would you cover? I rooted for the Wizards growing up, so I'd pick them, and I covered the Wizards for like a year in my late college days for Bullets Forever, the SB Nation site for the Wizards. Good times there. You can read me writing dumb stuff about like Otto Porter's restricted free agency and Sheldon McClellan, if any of you remember him. A lot of random posts back in the day. But living in Indy, love covering this Pacers team, and we'll continue to do so. Good questions, AJ. Love the 3-parters. Elliot Beaver, longtime question asker at Beaver Elliott says, do you believe Jalen Smith and Isaiah Jackson can be a successful front court of the future for the Pacers long term? Also, do you see Duarte as more of a long-term starter or a sixth man for this team? I kind of talked about that 2 questions ago for the second part, that I think Duarte, I view him as a long-term starter. Certainly is a high-level shooter who can also do a little bit off the bounce and a good defender. He is, to me, he has a chance to be a very, very, very high-level 3-and-D wing, which is so valuable in the NBA today. But for the first part of that question, that's an interesting one. Isaiah Jackson and Jalen Smith, if you presume that Miles Turner will either be traded or his contract will expire and he will not be on the Pacers next season, that's probably their 2 young bigs that will be the starting front court right as soon as next season. Jalen Smith and Isaiah Jackson, which I think is a very interesting duo. And interesting is a nice rosy way of looking at it because one of those guys is going to have to defend 5s, right? And I think I would say right this second, Jalen Smith would be better at it. He's got the bulk to do it a little better. but I think Isaiah Jackson will be the better defender of the two. In fact, I'm almost certain of that. So there's a couple things that would get in the way of them right now being good. One of them's going to have to defend fives, like I just said, and I don't know if either of them can do that at a high level right now. Like everybody gets their butt kicked by your Joel Embiid's, your Jokic's, but those two guys would get their butts kicked by like Drummond and Montrezl Harrell and Dwight Powell kind of guys, who aren't that strong but are just really good screen setters, really well timed roll men who are strong. They would just run over those two guys. So one of them is going to have to either bulk up or just be a little bit better at fighting in post positions and stuff like that. In that sort of situation, I think both of them could get there. They're both really young still, but that is something that will have to matter there. And I think Jalen's shot has to be real. He shot well from three for the Pacers last season, but that was really ignited by hot shooting right when he got here. Not that he still shot okay for down the stretch, but if you look at the splits, his first half of his games with the Pacers were much better than the second half. If that's real, if he's a 37% 3-point shooter like every season for the next 5 years, they can coexist. That makes you possible to just stick you anywhere on offense and they can fit fine. But if that's not real, it's going to be really awkward and clunky getting those two guys out there offensively. So I think that's kind of an either or. One of them is going to have to be able to defend fives, or one of them will have to be able to shoot. Maybe Isaiah Jackson can get there. If neither of those happen, it's not possible. But they're both pretty mobile, and mobility allows you to space out and cut and defend away from the rim. Like I think even right now for 5 or 10 minutes a game, why not? It won't be horrible. It'll rely on one of those things clicking every night where it's defending a center or hitting some shots. But right now it'd be fine for a few minutes a game. But if you want it to be extended, or if you want it to be a playoff, even front court rotation, which eventually the Pacers will have to start thinking about the postseason, one of those things will have to happen where they can defend fives well as a tandem, or one of them individually, or one of them learns to shoot the ball. Right now, it's hard to project which one would there be. One more fun question this segment from Alex Riley, if you know him from Twitter, AK Riley, the video maker extraordinaire. I literally don't even know how to do that or where to start to make videos like that with the effects and the editing and the voices and the sound. It's unbelievable. Anywho, Alex, you do great work. He says, what case are you picking if you get on Deal or No Deal? Backstory, I live tweet all the Deal or No Deal halftime shows or timeout breaks, whatever they are, that happen at Pacers and Fever games. I absolutely love Deal or No Deal. I used to watch it with my mom all the time, and my roommates and I had Game Show Network in college, and we would literally just throw it on at like 8 a.m. and not turn the TV off till 10 p.m. So no matter who was there or who was in the room, we would have GSN on, and we watched a lot of Deal or No Deal, a lot of Chain Reaction, if anyone's seen that, ton of Family Feud. Anyway, love Deal or No Deal. Absolutely love it. It's a lot more fun with way more cases. There's only 4 during Pacers games, but either way, one of my favorite game shows. Watching it with my mom was always funny because we would always joke, like, you show up with nothing, right? So you open the 6 cases and Howie Mandel goes, okay, the banker's offering you $30,000. We just be like, deal, I'll take the money. Anywho, I'm going to be nerdy for a second. I actually track the cases now. So in the Fever season, the best 2 cases have been the E and the Y. They have the best expected value in terms of what's been in them so far, both of them netting an average of $275 per choice. I'd pick the E for East. I would also pick the E because there's this weird thing where everybody picks the Y to be opened after, like 3 straight contestants at Fever games have picked the Y for their case. Got to pick the E to be a little different and mix it up there. Everybody picks the Y and everybody opens the key as one of their 2, which I think is really interesting human theory there. And now I've talked for a minute and a half about Deal or No Deal on a Pacers podcast. Sorry, everybody. Great question. Alex, I'm picking the E. One more break. We'll come back. We got 3 more questions about the Pacers, about Rick Carlisle's philosophy coaching this team, a big what if since I started covering this team, and one more silly question. You don't want to miss it. Thanks again, everybody, for making Locked On Pacers your first listen today and every single day. For your second listen, hop on over to Locked On Nets. Get their side of the Kevin Durant saga now that the Celtics are involved in all this. Or if you're sick of Kevin Durant stuff, go to Locked On Nuggets. Adam Mares and Matt Moore do a great job covering that Nuggets team and all the intricacies behind what they could look like on the floor this coming season. Next question we got comes from Matt Jackson at McBearcat7557, who says, do you think Carlisle will actively help in tanking, i.e., resting guys, sitting certain guys in moments, letting the bench stay out too long, etc.? No, emphatically, no. Coaches don't really tank. Players don't really tank. The people who tank are, on most franchises at least, are the decision makers who say, this guy's done for the season, or, oh, we're going to trade away this good player and be worse on purpose. I would say that Carlisle does have a hand, in decision making for team building, and in that way, I suppose, yes. But my emphatic answer to that would be no. I do not. I think Carlisle will try to win every game with the resources he has. I think the players on this team will be trying their hardest to win every single game that they possibly can. So is it possible that Carlisle and the front office, to the extent that Carlisle is involved in any trades during the season, decide to trade away someone like Buddy Hield or Miles Turner or TJ McConnell or someone who's helping the Pacers win? Heck yeah, that's possible. That might even be the best thing they could do in the case of Miles Turner on his expiring contract. But in terms of like on the court stuff, oh no. Resting guys, the Brogdon stuff was interesting to me because everybody else, I guess they shut down a few guys, but it actually made more sense long term to shut down guys like Warren and Turner. Brogdon was an interesting one to me last year, but I think that is an unusual case more so than the norm for what the Pacers will do. And I don't think he did anything, or the Pacers did anything else that would suggest to me that they were doing any on-court taking besides just being bad and blowing an abnormal historic number of leads. So no, my answer is no, despite me just saying a bunch of things that suggest that last year they might have been, but I don't think they were last year. I think they were just a bad team that didn't know how to close games at all. And I think next year they will probably still be a bad team with their roster, but I don't think Carlisle will play any sort of active hand in that sort of thing. I was thrilled to answer this one last because I think this is a really, really good question. Young Simba at the 2K Messiah says, what do you think is the biggest what if for the Pacers during your time covering the team? I think this is easy, and I'm actually surprised this is not more discussed amongst fans, media types, and I'm a media type, so I'm pinching myself a little bit here. How good the Pacers were in 2018-19. Victor Oladipo's injury, basically, is my what if here. The Pacers in Vic's first year, I think everybody knows this, right? They were good. They were a 48-win team, 5 seed, 1 win from the second round, right? That was a good team. He was an all-star level player. And then the next year, he was still a little worse, right? The three-pointer wasn't as good, but it was still okay. He was a little less bursty, but still good enough. The steals were down, but the assists were way up. He was playmaking better. He had better teammates, right? I feel like I'm doing too much history here, but like the 2018-19 Pacers, remember they added Tyreke Evans, who, despite being way underwhelming, was still better than most of the second unit guys they had the year before. They added Doug McDermott, who gave them a shooting element off the bench. They had Kyle O'Quinn to stabilize their deep center rotation. Like that team added pieces to a team that was 1 win from winning in the second round. And so they go into the season, and Vic played 36 games in the 2018-19 season. And yes, Vic was worse that year than he was the year before. But let me add in a caveat for you. The Pacers that season in Victor Oladipo's 36 games went 25-11. 25-11. That team was super good. Super, super good, right? 25 wins in 36 tries is basically a 70 win percentage team. Over a full season, I'm literally doing the math right now, that's a 57 win team. Like that team was fantastic. Sabonis was ascending. That was the last year he wasn't a starter, but everybody was clamoring by midseason that he had to become a starter. He was an all-star the next year when he moved into the starting five. Like if Vic doesn't get hurt in 2018-19, that team would have been capital G good. They almost certainly would have won a first round series that year because they were much better than the team they were the prior season. I wish I remember what seed they were in the East when Vic got hurt. They still end up getting into the playoffs easily as the 5 seed, being led by Bojan Bogdanovic on offense, right? They had enough pieces to still be an okay team. Like if Vic doesn't get hurt that year, that team is awesome. And that's just the short term what if Vic does not get hurt that year. The long term is what happens the next season. What happens with him? Does he still love playing in this market and having it be his city instead of a bunch of other kind of talented pieces coming in? If him and Brogdon can play together day one, how much do they gel instead of being forced to basically, 3 months into their first season, play for a month just to have the season pause for COVID, and then they jump back in the bubble. And then in the bubble, Sabonis' foot thing happens in that playoff series, and it just never clicked again when he returned. If he did not get hurt, if Victor Oladipo did not get hurt, I think that's got to be the biggest what if since I started covering the team. I considered PG alternative trades, although they absolutely nailed that. So it's hard to think about what other what ifs could have looked like there. I considered just doing the Sabonis foot injury in the bubble. I mean, I think they would have lost to the Heat anyway, pretty handily too. That Heat team was awesome and went to the finals. But if they could have won 2 games that summer, where do they think they are at that point? Do they view where they are as a team differently if they don't get swept? Like, I bet Nate McMillan, even if they won 1 game that series, I bet Nate McMillan would still have been their head coach heading into the next season. That's a big what if, but not nearly as big as the Vic one. The other thing I considered after the bubble season, the Gordon Hayward stuff, right? Hayward, it wasn't amazing at that stage of his career. I don't think anyone will argue that now, and his contract certainly looks bad, although he would have made about, I think, 30 million, 20 million less from the Pacers than the Hornets. He was coming off of an 18-7 season, and then in Charlotte, his first year was an all-star candidate before getting hurt, 20-6 guy. Add that in, Vic was still on the team at the start of 2020-21. Like, I don't think people remember how all this looped together. Like, that team would have been starting Sabonis, Hayward, and Depot, and Brogdon. Like, that would have been a pretty dang good team. So much changes when the Celtics just aren't willing to do it. I think that's a really big what if. And I do think that, not in a way that's just like, wow, the Pacers would have been so good. I'd just be really curious what that team would have looked like. Because again, remember, they entered that season with Oladipo. Are they really rushing to trade him? Does he still feel similarly about leaving versus staying if they get a guy like Hayward, if they're much better? I have no idea. It's hard to say, but I think that's a much bigger what if, especially in retrospect, considering how terrible that season went with Bjorkgren and everything that went on. What would have gone differently if the roster had changed? What is this scenario where the 2020-21 Pacers with Brogdon, Depot, TJ Warren started that season? Remember TJ Warren? The starting 5 for that season could have been, with Nate McMillan as the head coach, Victor Oladipo, Malcolm Brogdon, TJ Warren, Gordon Hayward, and Sabonis. What of that? That only takes, one injury not happening. And that basically was a plausible thing to happen. But what ifs, you can go down so many branches. If you guys want, now that we're at the end of this show, actually there's one more question, but I'll fit this in really quick. If you guys want, in August, when the shows are less topical because there's not as much NBA stuff going on in August, I can do some shows just about what ifs. What if the Pacers did XYZ? What about this? Reviewing historic stuff. Those did really well during the COVID year. Adam and I went back and watched the 2000 finals, for example, and reviewed some of those games. If you guys want to do what ifs, I'm happy to do what ifs. I think those shows are really, really interesting things to do in the doldrums of the offseason. The last question of this show is not a Pacers question at all. Caleb Zane at Caleb_Zane_. Is cheesecake a pie? I had to cheat. My gut said no. No. But so there's something about the crust that made me feel like that's what a pie is when I was thinking about the differences. I think of between cheesecake and pie, but like a round dessert, they're not that much different. No one ever would call it cheesecake pie. So I Googled the definition of pie. And then during this show, while I was talking, I closed the tab. So that's really unfortunate. But the definition of pie, now that I have it up again, is a baked dish of fruit or of meat and vegetables, typically with a top and base of pastry. I don't think there's fruit, meat, or vegetables in cheesecake, although there can be fruit in or on cheesecake, which makes it a little bit of a gray and tough area. But I would say in general, you don't bake the ingredients right into the cheesecake. Usually you can, but usually that's not the case. And meat and veggies are never in cheesecake. So I'll say no, but I will say strawberry. If you get some strawberries baked into the cake and put them on top, I guess that would count. If you show me a cheesecake with some lattices, then yes, I will start to believe in that more often. Thank you everybody for submitting questions for these shows. Much appreciated. Hope everybody enjoyed the Mailbag show. Sorry for the scheduling change. If you were hoping for James Boyd today, again, you will get him on Friday as we talk about the biggest storylines left for the Pacers this summer. In the meantime, tomorrow, we're going to create a Pacers rotation. It's going to be a fun and challenging exercise because they have a lot of guys who, in theory, deserve some minutes. So I'm looking forward to, personally for myself, kind of sorting that all out and seeing where the Pacers are. Thank you guys a ton for listening. Have a great day, and we will see you tomorrow.